Hello everybody and welcome back aboard the Hype Train. I of course am Sir Beardian and today we are doing part 3 of our ground combat overhaul. So yesterday we touched on this a little bit, but today we are going to be doing a summary of the basic new rules of actual ground combat and how battles are actually fought. So ground combat is conducted after the naval combat phase of each increment. So ships are going to shoot first, then ground troops are going to go. One combat round will be performed every 8 hours that passed in that increment. Combat potentially takes place on any system body where populations exist from 2 or more hostile powers. If only one side has ground forces present, so when you defeat all the defenders, there may be a conquest. If ground forces are present from 2 or more hostile powers, ground combat will actually take place. Ground forces can be assigned one of 4 field positions: frontline attack, frontline defense, support, and rear echelon. Units in support and rear echelon positions cannot directly attack hostile forces, but if they possess elements with bombardment weapons, they may be assigned to support a frontline formation. Support and rear echelon formations can also potentially provide anti-air cover, which we will cover tomorrow, and supply to frontline units. Only formations with all elements supplied can be placed in frontline attack mode. Formations placed in frontline attack mode lose any fortification bonus. Each race involved in a combat on a system body creates a list of its own formations on that system body, even if in multiple populations, plus a list of hostile alien formations, even if they are from multiple alien races in multiple populations. Hostile formations are checked for their weighted size. This is based on actual size for frontline size, 25% for support, and 5% for rear echelon. Each hostile formation is given a range for potential selection based on its weighted size. So what does that mean? So that basically means that each race, no matter how many populations it has, is going to pull all of its own formations on that body, and is going to basically pick targets from a single pool of all hostile alien formations. So even if there are multiple races in there, it's going to be one single pool. And it's going to be based on their weighted size. That means that if you have a very, very large formation, that formation is going to get hit first, or at least is more likely to get hit. So you don't want very, very large support and supply formations. Otherwise, they might actually get attacked. You want your strongest formations to be the biggest so that they get the highest chance of actually getting attacked and have the highest chance of survival. Frontline is obviously going to be full size, 25% for support and 5% for rear echelon. So that obviously is going to represent that support formations are less likely to get hit and rear echelon are less likely to actually get attacked, simply because the frontline formations are literally in the way. If you try and rush for the support and rear echelon positions, you're going to encounter those frontline formations first. Each frontline friendly formation randomly targets a hostile formation. Friendly units with frontline defense can target hostile frontline formations. Friendly units with frontline attack can target any hostile formation, although support and rear echelon are less likely given their smaller weighted size. In fact, the more formations that are pushed into frontline positions, the less likely it is that rear areas will be attacked. So obviously, if you have 100 men on the front line, it's going to be much more likely they're going to be able to break through than if they have 10,000 men on the front line. Support and rear echelon formations that contain formation elements with bombardment weapons can be assigned to support frontline formations that are part of the same organization. Formations in a support position with light bombardment weapons will fire with their frontline formations. Formations in a support position with medium or heavy bombardment weapons or formations in a rear echelon position with heavy bombardment weapons will fire in a subsequent phase. Once a frontline formation or a light bombardment element in the support position has been matched against a hostile formation, each friendly individual unit, a soldier or vehicle, in that formation engages a random element in the hostile formation, with the randomization based on the relative size of a hostile formation elements. The targeting on an individual unit level represents that the different elements in a frontline formation will generally be attacking in conjunction, so infantry supporting tanks, etc. Once all frontline attacks have been concluded, each unit in each element providing supporting bombardment will engage either the hostile formation being targeted by the friendly formation they are supporting, or one of the hostile formation's own supporting elements, a counter battery fire. If the hostile formation is targeted, each unit in the supporting artillery element engages a random element in the hostile formation, with the randomization based on the relative size of the hostile formation elements. So the same as frontline versus frontline. If a hostile supporting element is targeted, all fire is directed against that element. This represents the difference between providing supporting fire in a combined arms frontline battle and targeting specific hostile artillery for counter-battery fire. The decision to target the hostile frontline formation versus hostile support elements is based on the relative sizes. So what have we got so far? So we have individual formations going head-to-head against each other. We've got front lines fighting front lines. Frontline attack are going to be try and push towards the rear echelons to destroy the enemy army. Frontline defense are going to be counter-attacking the enemy front line. We're going to have support and bombardment weapons in the support and rear echelon positions, which are going to be more defended. Interestingly enough, they're also not going to lose their fortification bonuses, because only the frontline attack position does that. We're also going to have simulations of infantry and tanks and armor advancing and fighting together, in that each individual soldier or vehicle engages a random element within the hostile formation, while artillery seems to have two modes. Either scatters its shot amongst the enemy front line, or it just picks one particular artillery element and just wreck his day. So it's going to be very interesting. I'm very much looking forward to seeing these battles actually come into their own being. So continuing with the artillery. Supporting medium artillery will choose between hostile forces in frontline or support field positions, and will ignore any elements in rear echelon field position for the purposes of relative size, while heavy artillery can select targets in any field position. In other words, if the enemy has supporting heavy artillery in a rear echelon position, you will only be able to target those elements with your own heavy artillery, or heavier, or aircraft. Once all the initial combat is complete, there is a chance for a breakthrough. Each defending formation is checked according to the following procedure. A cohesion damage value is determined for each formation element using the following formula. Element class size times the unit destroyed in combat phase times 100 over element morale. So the more you destroy of their actual element, and the lower their morale is, the higher the chance. The total cohesion damage is summed for all elements in the formation and compared to the formation size. This value from 0 to 100% is the formation cohesion rating. For each frontline formation that attacked the defending formation, a breakthrough value is determined for each formation element. Static elements have 0 breakthrough value. Vehicle elements use the following formula. Element class size times element units times element morale divided by 100. Infantry elements use the same formula as vehicles with a further modifier of 0.5. So vehicles, armor, are going to have a higher breakthrough value than infantry is, while static elements will not be able to break through at all, for obvious reasons. Interestingly enough, it seems to be that the larger the element and the more element it has, or the more units the element has, the more likely the breakthrough will be, which to me is kind of interesting, because you would expect that a smaller, more intact unit would be more likely to slip through those cracks, while a larger element, while yeah, it can overrun a badly damaged element, is potentially less likely to slip through smaller cracks. Whereas having a high breakthrough implies that you can break through even the smaller gaps compared to something that needs to break more of the defenses down before it can actually get through them. I'm not sure if this is realistic, but it's definitely interesting. And it definitely gauges more towards having larger, more numerous units. So, however, because the element units and the class size are multiplied, it also means that if you have like 10 times the number of elements or the number of units within your element, it can potentially make up for having smaller units. So it's interesting. I'm going to be very interested to see exactly how these numbers play out. So the total breakthrough value is then summed for all elements in the attacking formation and compared to the formation size. The value is multiplied by 2 if the formation has a field position of frontline attack. Obviously, front lines are going to be more likely to actually break through. This value from 0 to 200% is the formation breakthrough rating. So we have the total breakthrough value for the element, and then all the elements are put together into the single formation, right? Now that's good because that means that if you have a bunch of infantry in your formation, having tanks can boost that. So adding a little bit of tanks can potentially boost that breakthrough value overall for the formation. That's a bit more realistic to me. I like that. So rule 5 compensates for the lack of realism in number 4. A breakthrough potential value is determined for the attacking formation by multiplying the defending formation cohesion rating by the attacking formation breakthrough rating. If this value is equal or greater than 30%, a breakthrough has occurred for that attacking formation. So far, what we can see is that very large elements, very large formations are going to have a much higher chance to break through a enemy formation which has smaller elements or just fewer units, or just with more units just shattered and broken from actual combat. Last thing, each formation that creates a breakthrough mounts a second attack. This attack does not benefit from supporting artillery or fighter support. However, it functions as if the attacking formation has a field position of frontline attack, which means all hostile formations are potential targets, not just those on the front line. Now that's super interesting because that means that defending positions can potentially now break through to attack more offensive positions. So that means that you don't need units in the front line to actually break through and attack the rear positions, which is really cool because that means you can have really big, nasty defensive formations that are potentially going to be able to break through enemy offensive positions. So it's still possible to break through if you're entirely on the defensive, which is pretty cool. So the breakthrough rules mean that defending formations that suffer casualties may allow attacking formations to penetrate their lines and conduct a second attack. This is more likely under the following circumstances. A single defending formation is attacked by multiple attacking formations. The defenders suffer a high casualty percentage in a single ground combat round, so potentially because the formation is small in size. The defender suffers disproportionate casualties to elements with larger unit classes. The defender has low morale, the attacker is primarily vehicle-based, the attacker is on the frontline attack, or the attacker has high morale. So all these elements, which kind of makes sense, increase the chances of a breakthrough, which is cool. When a formation element is engaged in combat against a hostile formation element, supply is checked. If supply is not available, the number of units firing with 25% of normal. Each attacking unit uses the following process. The 2-hit chance is determined. The base chance is 20% multiplied by the dominant terrain 2-hit modifier, the firing element morale divided by 100, and if the target is not fortified, the base 2-hit chance for the target element unit class. The fortification modifier for the target element is determined, which is the current fortification level of the target multiplied by the dominant terrain fortification multiplier. If the target is not fortified, the fortification modifier is 1. Interestingly enough, as we saw yesterday, the terrain fortification modifier does not seem to take effect until it is 1. So keep that in mind. The environment modifier is calculated taking into account gravity, pressure, and temperature, and whether the firing element has capabilities in those environments. Each environment for which the element is not trained has a 2x modifier. The terrain capability modifier is calculated. If the element is trained to fight in the dominant terrain, the modifier is 0.5. The final chance to hit is calculated as 2-hit chance divided by fortification multiplier times environment multiplier times terrain capability modifier. The unit fires each weapon it has, except for non-bombardment weapons or units bombarding from support and rear echelon field positions. If the 2-hit roll is equal or less than the final chance to hit, the weapon has struck the target. If the hit has scored, the armor-piercing AP value of the weapon is checked against the armor of the target. If AP is equal or greater than armor, the shot has penetrated. If AP is less than armor, the percentage chance to penetrate armor is AP divided by armor squared. If the shot penetrates armor, the percentage chance of destroying the target is equal to weapon damage divided by target hit points squared. If a target is destroyed, the firing element gains morale and the target element suffers a loss of morale. The morale gain loss is doubled if the firing unit is in the frontline attack mode. So what we have then is We have big impacts from fortification, environment, and terrain capability. You want your attacking troops and even defending troops to have the correct terrain capabilities for the terrain they're going to be fighting in. You want them to be capable in the environment that they're going to be fighting in. And if you're defending, you want them to be fortified as much as possible. All of this will decrease the chances of them getting hit in the first place. And if they're not getting hit in the first place, then you don't have to worry about how much armor or hit points they have. If you have these capabilities, that's good. If you have crazy planets where getting these capabilities is difficult, or where the planets are so different from what the enemy is coming from that they're not trained or suitable for them, then you can potentially skimp on more defense because your fortification modifier and your environment and terrain modifiers are going to be able to make up for that. And of course, having those modifiers for yourself is going to help being able to actually shoot them. So that's going to play a huge role. We're also going to want to have a good amount of armor. Now, because the armor and the AP is just a straight division, well, it gets squared afterwards, but you want the armor to be as high as possible to reduce the final number from the squaring. I would be interested to figure out what happens, because this is ultimately a number that's below 1 if your armor is above the AP. And if you multiply two numbers that are below 1, you kind of get a number that's smaller. That seems a bit strange to me, because that means that if your armor is greater than the AP value, then you can potentially reduce their attack capabilities more than, like, way more than if the armor is below their AP. So if this doesn't do anything weird, that tells me that having your armor greater than their AP is way, way, way more important than having it a little bit better, but still below their AP. Same with the hit points. Because it's squaring, you really, really need to have your own hit points and armor higher than their AP and weapon damage, and vice versa when you're attacking. Because when you hit, if that square is reducing the number even further for you, then you're probably going to have a really hard time actually killing anything. That's going to be a very interesting thing to see exactly how that plays out, and whether Steve does do anything to help mitigate that. Finally, all combat is conducted simultaneously and losses are applied once all firing is completed. Because of the way the above is structured, multi-way conflicts with multiple races on each side are possible. As we mentioned earlier, all the defensive formations from all hostile targets are all stacked together for each race. So if each race considers each other race as hostile to itself, then each of its own units are going to be able to attack any target. So yeah, you can definitely have a 3-way, 4-way, 5-way brawl on a single planet where, God, that would be a meat grinder. Yeah, that would be an absolute meat grinder. We'll see how that plays out, because I completely and wholeheartedly expect that to happen. But that is it for today. Join me tomorrow once more, where we should be finalizing the changes to ground combat, and then we will continue covering the rest of the changes for C# Aurora every day this month until launch. Down below, we have links to the official Aurora Discord, Reddit, and the forums where you can join the discussion and the hype, and I will see you next time.